I ran out of juice. It's still good enough.
Good afternoon. I'd like to call this meeting of the Tennessee Fish and Wildlife Commission Committee Day to order. And please join me for the invocation and pledge led by Commissioner Brad Box.
Let's pray. Father God, thank you for a beautiful day. We thank you for safe travels bringing us here. We thank you for Tennessee Farm Bureau. We thank you for the men and women that work here and all the ways they support Tennesseans, especially our farm communities and all the people that live in the rural areas of our state. We ask you to bless our time together, bless our conversation, give us hearts that desire first to serve you. And we would ask that everything that we say or do would be pleasing to you. In Christ's name, amen.
Amen.
Let's pledge. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Commissioner Box. Miss Mary, would you call the roll, please?
Monty Blue,
Here.
Brad Box,
Here.
Stan Butt,
Here.
Wally Childress, Bill Cox, Greg Davenport,
Here.
Chris Devaney,
Here.
Ford Little, Rhonda Moody, Chip Saltzman, Tommy Woods, Hank Wright, Jimmy Granbery.
Here.
Chairman, we have a quorum.
Thank you, Mary. All right, we've got a long list of visitors here today. We welcome Clarence and Laura Dye. Thank you all for coming and hope you enjoyed your lunch. Jan Seifert with Higher Pursuits, Al Ray with Maury County Parks, Shelley Vanny of Vanoy, with TFEF, Christian Warner, I can't read these right, but I'm sorry, Kevin Hensley, Brian Wright, Mike Butler with Federation, April Ware, Tiffany Maxedon, and Chris Blue. Anybody else? Did we miss anybody? Commissioner Butt, did you want to say something real quick?
Yes, I'd like to acknowledge two of our visitors. A couple of years ago, when I first came on the commission, Dawn and her, Jan and her partner, who own Higher Pursuits, made a presentation to the commission in Cookville. Since then, I've had the pleasure of visiting with them on a number of occasions. As the owner of Higher Pursuits on the Duck River, they do an outstanding job of policing trash and trying to help maintain the river. Al Ray, who is our director of Parks and Rec here in Maury County, have been working together to enhance the beauty of the river and to try to bring recognition to the jewel that we have here in Maury County. So I just wanted to acknowledge the efforts of both of those and working with the agency and becoming great partners. So thank you both for being here. We look forward to continuing to work together with you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Butt. Director Maxedon.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon, members of the commission. It's certainly been a busy summer for the agency. Since our last meeting, we had several field days. I know many of you attended some of these, including a quail field day at Bridgestone Firestone WMA, which was hosted by Furbearer and Quail Forever. And we also had a waterfowl field day and a duck calling contest at Pagoda WMA, which Commissioner Childress and the Pagoda boys helped organize. I wanted to take a second to highlight two young men. If you'll turn your attention to the screen, that participated in a calling event. This is Nate and Logan Ebner. Their grandfather brought them to the event and shared with us an incredible story. The younger brother was born with extensive heart issues. As they got older, his brother had really gotten into duck calling. And so he started joining his brother and practicing calling to improve his lung capacity and ultimately his stamina. He's doing great now. And they are a very impressive team. They were very impressive to watch both of these boys, probably some of the best duck callers that I've ever personally seen. They won first and second place in the youth division and then placed second in the team division. And this was competing with adults from many different states that came in for this. Young men like this are why we do outreach events. It's why we create opportunities for young people to get involved in everything from hunting to fishing to the outdoors, because it offers great health benefits. It also has the potential to change lives. And for these young men, it's created a lot of memories that will stick with them throughout their whole lives. They both shared with us about how they're getting out and duck hunting with their grandfather, and I know that's very special to him as well. Tomorrow, Communications Director Emily Buck is going to be presenting more on how we support youth and some of the partnerships that we're involved in. Both of these field days also had great opportunities for farmers and for landowners to see habitat in action and to learn more about how they can incorporate conservation into their farming practices. Titterbury is proud to manage 1.6 million acres of public land for wildlife habitat and for hunting access. But 90% of the land that's in Tennessee is privately owned, making farmers and landowners one of our most important partners in conservation. Coming up today on the agenda You're going to be hearing from one of our private lands biologists who's going to provide an update on how we're helping improve conservation and sustainability on farms. We're grateful to be here at the Tennessee Farm Bureau headquarters because Farm Bureau has been a great partner to the Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency over the years. They've been gracious enough to work with us through legislation on different policy issues where we've crossed paths. And we've been excited to work on growing our partnerships with shooting sports with them. So we're looking forward to continuing to grow our partnership with farmers and landowners in the coming years. Just want to say thank you to Farm Bureau. We had a great lunch that they provided us today. They've been a great partner. You're going to hear from President Mayberry tomorrow. But thank you so much for hosting us. I did learn today that we actually had a meeting here in 2000. I bet there was probably a little bit of elk discussion that probably occurred around that time period. Probably an interesting discussion, but great venue. President, thank you so much for allowing us to come in today and for hosting us here. Mr. Chairman, that's all the comments.
Thank you, Director. I also will reiterate on the behalf of the commission, we really appreciate Farm Bureau. I know we've been talking about this meeting and looking forward to this meeting for a long time. And all our friends here today from Farm Bureau, we really appreciate it. So I want to thank Stan Butt last night for hosting dinner. We had a wonderful time at a local Columbia restaurant and had the owner serving us. So we had the best of the best in service. Also like to thank Tommy Edwards and his team at Yanali for their hard work in their tour this morning. It was really a lot of fun and very informational for all of us on the commission who unfortunately don't get to spend as much time in the woods as we would all like. So any other commissioners have any comments or things they'd like to say before we get into the agenda? All right, seeing none, I will now turn the meeting over to Committee Chair Tommy Woods of the Chairman of the Boating Law Enforcement Committee. Tommy?
Thank you, Chairman Granbery. At this time, I'd like to ask Lieutenant Colonel Matt Majors to come forward for a proclamation presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Proclamation 24-13 is going to be a temporary lift of a no-wake zone in Region 3. That'll be in Marion County, Tennessee, and that is near Marion County Park. They do this boat race every year, and this is a common proclamation that we have. The rain-out date would be the day after the races, and this will affect boat traffic in that area from 8 a.m. to sundown. And we will have wildlife officers from our boating law enforcement division there to ensure the safety of all the people that are actually watching the race. It's a pretty big draw of people that come watch that. And that's all I've got. Any questions?
Thank you, Lieutenant Colonel. Committee members, any questions? Hearing none. Commission, full commission, any questions? None. Hearing none. Committee members, we're ready to refer this proclamation to the full commission. All those in favor say yay. Nobody. Yeah, just the committee members.
Got a bashful bunch, Tommy.
All right, we need a motion to further this. Do I hear a motion? All those on the Boating and Law Enforcement Committee.
You have the names of it.
I don't in front of me.
Chairman, you mean to read the committee members?
Please.
Okay. Tommy Woods, Chair, Monty Ballou, Vice Chair, Chip Saltzman, Ford Little, Greg Davenport, and Bill Cox.
I move approval of proclamation.
Do I have a second? All those in favor? Motion moves to the full commission tomorrow.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Commissioners.
Lieutenant Colonel. Mr. Chairman, that concludes the Boating and Law Enforcement Committee business.
Thank you, Chairman Woods. And the Fisheries Committee will meet after the meeting for a little reinforcement on their training exercise of how to move these motions forward. We'll have a little remedial training afterwards. Thank you, Chairman Woods. At this time, I'll turn the meeting over to Vice Chairman Greg Davenport, who will take care of the Wildlife Committee today.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At this time, I would like to ask Assistant ChiefWally Akins to come to the microphone.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. My name is Wally Akins. I'm Assistant Chief of our Habitat section in the Wildlife and Forestry Division, which includes all of our WMAs, our private lands, and our forestry programs. So I want to introduce David Lowman today. He will be presenting. He is one of our private lands habitat biologists. The position he currently holds was approved by the commission 2 or 3 years ago, and we were real fortunate to get David to hire him in this position. He has a little bit different job responsibilities than the other private lands habitat biologists, and he primarily works in prescribed fire. I don't want to steal any of his thunder, but he has shown great dividends. The folks in the state have really benefited from David and his crew that he leads. A lot of positive response, a lot of positive feedback we have received in a short 18 months that David has had this position. So with that, I'll turn it over to David Lowman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for having me this afternoon. Just to introduce myself, my name's David Lowman. I am on the private land staff. I work as a habitat manager out of Crossville, Tennessee. Focus on leading and coordinating the habitat specialist crew, and I'll dive into that here in a bit. But seeing as we are at the Farm Bureau today, thought it'd be a great opportunity to highlight opportunities the agency has to work with our farmers and our private landowners here across the state. So diving into this, going to be an overview on 2 of our programs. The first is a Sharecrop lease program that's on our WMAs. And then the second part of this will be a private lands overview, going to highlight the habitat specialist crew and some of the accomplishments of both our private land biologists and this crew. So the Sharecrop lease program, it's an opportunity for local producers to lease ground on WMAs. Farmers are our partners here. So there are 2 lease types. The first is a service lease. That's basically where a percentage of the crop is left unharvested for wildlife. And then the second option is a cash lease, where a payment or service in lieu of cash is provided. And I'll dive in a bit on what the service in lieu of cash is. But a third of those leases are service leases, and then the other 2/3 are cash leases. So by far, it's the more popular option. These leases are up to 5 years, but due to recent legislation, there are opportunities for these producers to renew prior to expiration. So these are utilized in all 4 of our all 4 regions on roughly 17 WMAs. In 2023, there were 2/3 of crop ground on WMAs were in active leases for a total of 96 leases covering just short of 16,000 acres. There's roughly 24,000 acres of crop ground throughout Tennessee on our WMAs. So like I said before, that's about 2/3 of the area. There is a $1.5 million estimated value of these leases, and that comes from the income from cash leases and the value of the in-lieu services. There's also a community impact. It provides a great opportunity for these farmers and producers to farm additional acreage and increase their base acres, while also at the same time getting involved with their local WMAs. So for the in lieu of cash example, we pulled this from Low Buying WMA in 2019, and this was a 688 acre lease valued at just below $150,000. The producer on this decided to go with in-lieu services. And for this lease, he provided 450 acres of planting. This is sunflower, corn, and millet. And that's planting, spraying, and fertilizing. 80 hours of road grading, 2 hours bush hogging, 370 acres of spray and moist soil units, and 130 acres of heavy machinery works. And this impacted about 830 acres of managed habitat. It's a great opportunity, as I've said before, for this farmer to farm additional acres, but also provide some work on the WMAs. This frees up our WMA staff to focus on other priorities and projects. So now diving into our private lands program. This program began in 2007 with 3 wildlife habitat biologists. Since then, it's grown to 6 TWA staff. That's 4 wildlife habitat biologists. And these gentlemen, they are in NRCS field offices across the state, and their positions are co-funded by USDA NRCS. Then there's a habitat manager. That's myself, and I'll dive into my role here in a couple slides. And then finally, a program coordinator to oversee this program, work with our partners, and provide supervision. So what are our areas of responsibility? First and foremost, we work and connect with landowners. We meet them out on their properties, provide technical assistance, build relationships. And from this comes written wildlife management plans. And at the end of the day, we are guests on private property. So all of these plans are written based off of landowner goals and objectives. Next component of that is we assist NRCS field offices with conservation planning. As I mentioned before, the 4 wildlife habitat biologists, they are in NRCS field offices, and thus they work on taking those management plans they write or NRCS contracts and running these landowners through financial assistance programs to assist them with implementing these projects on the ground. Next part is habitat management assistance, especially prescribed fire. I'll be talking about the habitat specialist crew, but all 4 wildlife biologists and myself can serve as burn bosses. We work with landowners, conducting prescribed burns, writing burn plans. We also work with these landowners to provide assistance, education, demonstration on how to implement these habitat management recommendations. And then all of our wildlife habitat biologists also have seed drills and sprayers that are available for the use of landowners. Other big part of this is going to be partnerships. One thing in private lands is it's very uncommon for things to get done without working with multiple partners. You see that in positions, and I'll highlight some of those partnerships here coming up. And then finally, outreach and education. We're all responsible for organizing workshops, field days, trainings, and these can be for private landowners or these can be for resource professionals across the state. So some accomplishments, and these are just in FY24. So this is the fiscal year running from July 1, 2023 to the end of June 2024. So those 4 biologists, they conducted 527 field visits. That's going out, meeting with landowners, shaking hands, looking at properties. Out of those came 178 farm bill contracts or applications that they've worked on. And this impacted just short of 5,100 acres. They also wrote 149 wildlife management plans. And again, remember, these are landowner driven. And those plans covered roughly 5,700 acres. And then they conducted or assisted on 980 acres of prescribed burning, and then assisted or planned and ran 8 different workshops or trainings. This map here kind of highlights our positions across the state, both TWA and partner positions in NRCS field offices. If you see a circle around our star, that means that it's either a TWA employee or this commission has been involved in funding those positions and making them possible. Again, we're at Farm Bureau, so one position I do want to highlight in Jackson, Tennessee, Quail Forever has a precision ag conservation specialist, And that gentleman, he's not a biologist. He is he grew up in agriculture, and that's what he went to college for. And he's been crucial in working with farmers and producers, highlighting areas on their farm where they're losing money or those acres aren't productive, and helping turn their farms and productions into more profitable. And oftentimes he does that through implementing conservation programs, the majority of which benefit wildlife. So he's been a great asset in West Tennessee, and I believe there have been discussions about getting more of those positions down the road. So final part of this is the habitat specialist crew. This is a collaborative effort between TWRA, Quail Forever, and Southeastern Grasslands Institute. Quail Forever wrote the grant, and they hold the 4 habitat specialist positions. Southeastern Grasslands Institute provided project support and some funding up front. And then TWRA, they came on a little bit later in this process by providing the crew leader position, a work base for us. So we work out at Catoosa WMA, and have been instrumental, have made this possible get off the ground and get going the way it has. So this crew is funded by a National Fish and Wildlife Foundation grant. This was a 2-year project that began last spring. Quail Forever just applied for additional funding to keep this going for another 3 years. And because the way this grant works and its project area, we are focused on the Cumberland Plateau region of the state. So it is comprised of a crew leader. That's myself. I provide project coordination and burn bossing. Work is done by the 4-person Quail Forever habitat specialists. And they're out there working today. So we work on both private and public lands, but our focus is on implementation of Farm Bill programs. So those wildlife management plans that our biologists have written, once they get rolled into a Farm Bill program, if that's what we choose, then our focus is implementing those plans and those projects. As I said before, the bulk of our work is habitat management assistance, so actually going out and implementing this work, conducting prescribed burns. Everything we do is landowner driven, and some of the things that we do year in and year out are prescribed fire, invasive species control, forest stand improvement, establishing fire breaks, and more. So since May 2023, that's when the first 2 habitat specialists were hired and came on. We have impacted 3,280 acres, and that may not be accurate. I think we have a few acres that we've added in the last few weeks that aren't accounted for on here. This includes just over 2,700 acres of prescribed fire. We installed 6.8 miles of fire breaks, either through we don't have a tractor, so we're either putting in hand lines, backpack loader lines, or we're just out putting in a tilled fire break in the few spots you can on the plateau. 214 acres of invasive species control. This can be spraying things like tall fescue to establish early successional plant communities, or going in and treating some of our invasive woody species such as autumn olive, tree of heaven. And then finally, we've implemented 188 acres of forest stand improvement. This map here, it's a project map of all the properties we've worked on. Again, we are focused on the Cumberland Plateau. WMAs are also included on here. As I was putting this together, one thing that I noticed was a lot of these properties we're going to 2 to 3 times now. These landowners are asking us to come back to do additional work, and it's really cool getting to see long-term benefits out of these projects instead of just a one and done move on to the next area. Takeaways, again, we're grateful for our partnerships with Farm Bureau and our farmers here across the state. I do want to highlight 90% of Tennessee is privately owned. And because of that, working with our local ag producers and our private landowners, it's crucial to achieving the agency's mission across the state. Continued collaboration partnerships are important for the long-term management of our wildlife resources. This is true on both private and public land. As I said before, it's hard to get something done without working with partners. And then finally, just want to say thank you to all the landowners and farmers that we've worked with. Again, we wouldn't be. Finally, if anyone's watching, or if anyone ever would like to reach out for assistance on private lands, my contact info is on here, along with contact info of our 4 wildlife habitat biologists. If you're looking for assistance, reach out to one of the 5 of us, and we'll, depend on where you're at with the state, be more than glad to come out and meet with you. That's all I have, and thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lowman. While we're not voting to refer anything to the full commission, I would like to ask committee members Moody, Box, Butt, or Childress if they have any questions or discussion for Mr. Lowman.
I would make a comment. I've worked with my local land biologist, Clint Borum, on a number of occasions. I appreciate all the work that they put in. If the other especially guys across the state are as engaged as he is, then we're in good hands. So I just wanted to make that comment. And thank you, Clint. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Commissioner Butt. Any other comments from the committee? Any comments from the full commission?
Private lands, Chris Hunter or whoever it was, and they were all very pleased with their work. They did a great job helping them, doing the surveys and showing them where to burn and what to do. So they had a really good experience. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Cox. Thank you very much, Mr. Lowman.
Thank you, sir.
I'll now recognize Assistant Chief Mark McBride for a deer season reminder.
All right. Thank you, Vice Chairman Davenport. Good afternoon, Commissioners. So given that the archery velvet season starts tomorrow, hunting guides are hitting shelves, people are starting to pay attention to the deer season. People are recognizing that we made some changes. So we wanted to come today, just provide a little bit of a background, again, of why we made some of the changes that we did. I'll do a high-level overview of those changes and what the deer seasons are going to look like this year. And then lastly, I'm going to talk a little bit about a new reporting feature that we're going to have when hunters go to check in a deer this year, where they're going to have the option, if they so choose, to give us the location where they harvested that deer. And I want to talk a little bit about what that's going to look like and how that data will help improve some of our management. So for starters, I just want to back up and talk about this adaptive harvest management. This is the new framework that we're implementing for deer management here in Tennessee. We also did this for turkeys. I've presented on this quite a few times, but I just want to provide a reminder for you commissioners. I know we're getting a lot of questions from the public now, and for all the public, the hunters watching, hopefully they'll get a little understanding of why they're seeing some of these changes. But at the high level, the agency is now using additional data to set deer season. So instead of just looking at past harvests and trying to decipher what the populations might be doing, we're now using all this additional data that we collect, known age data, known sex data of our deer. We also have hunter effort, which helps kind of qualify that harvest. Harvest by itself, it's hard to figure out what's going on because we don't know how many people or how much time they invested to reach that harvest. Having that effort data really helps us qualify and kind of put that harvest in context. We've got this new structured, repeatable process, and that's really important because if we're trying to understand the decisions that we make and the impacts those decisions have as far as setting seasons, we need to know exactly how we arrived at that decision in order to go back and tweak things if we need to have a better outcome in the end. And then lastly, we now have objectives. So this process We assembled focus groups, members of the public, who gave us explicit objectives that they wanted us to try and meet with our deer management. We've never had those written down. You know, we kind of knew what we were managing for, but now we have written down explicit objectives, and everything we do is geared towards meeting those objectives. Not only are we using this data to set seasons, we're also using it to better monitor deer populations. So I'm going to go through this process again really quickly. This will be a little repetitive, but I want to use this opportunity to kind of address a few of the questions and concerns that we've been hearing from the public over the past few weeks. And you commissioners likely have been hearing some of this as well. So the first thing we did was create biologically relevant units. So we're getting a lot of questions. Why is my county in this unit and not that unit? How did you guys group counties together? And so I'm going to put all the data that we used up on the screen again. And so we use a computer algorithm essentially to go county by county, looking at these 10 different factors on the screen and group counties where these things were mostly similar. And that's important because we want to be monitoring deer at the scale where most of the underlying environmental and biological factors that influence those populations are similar. That helps us cut down on the uncertainty, wondering why changes might be occurring, and narrow down just to try and investigate what the impacts of hunting might be. And so I want to point out here, harvest is that first one. So we actually took the harvest density, because harvest by itself, again, doesn't really mean much. We want to know how is that harvest corrected for size, because all of our counties are different sizes. And that's one of the main factors that we looked at. So counties grouped together are those that have a similar density of harvest across that county. We then set objectives. And so these came from the focus groups. They were put in priority order of how people weighted them, how important they were to members of the public. And I just want to point out the first one here is maintaining a healthy deer population. So this whole system that I'm going to talk about in a second is designed first and foremost to meet that highest objective of maintaining a healthy deer population. So the next step in this process was developing regulation options. These are all the different seasons that we can pick from, ranging from highly conservative seasons to more liberal seasons that have more, doe harvest opportunity. And these were, again, driven by the public. We had a series of public meetings. We live streamed one of our videos and pushed a public survey out so folks could go give us input before we finalized all these different options. And I'll explain how we use those here in a second. So once all those pieces were together, this is where kind of the modeling and the science start. And this is done at each unit level. And so, again, go back to those units where we wanted all of those intrinsic factors that influence deer populations to be mostly similar. This is why, because when we're doing some of these mathematical models and trying to understand what's going on, we want everything to be as similar as possible that could influence those deer populations. So at each unit level, the first thing we're doing is we're using all that additional data that I talked about a little earlier, and we're looking at the population status in that unit. Is it high? Is it low? Is it going up? Is it going down? The next thing is to take all those regulation options that we developed in step 3, and we're applying harvest rates to those. Now, if you remember when we showed those back in March and April, when I showed all the different packages, all the hunting season options, they're very similar to hunting seasons that we've had across the state for years. So we've got historic harvest for each one of those packages. We know how people shoot deer under those packages. And so those harvest rates from 15 or 20 years of those seasons being implemented are used to determine what the impact of all those different hunting seasons might be on that population, where its current population status is. So once we put this whole thing together, we've got, okay, here's where the population status is. We're going to predict the impact that each one of those seasons might have on that population. And lastly, we tie all that to the objectives. Which season, based on where the population is going to best meet our objectives? And then that's the hunting season that we choose. And that's how we came up with our recommendations that we presented to you all in March and April. And so lastly, I can't do this without highlighting my favorite part of this whole process. This whole thing is designed for us to get better. And so after we select a season, we've made all these predictions of what we think the impacts of those hunting seasons are. Well, after the hunting season, we can go back, look at what the observed impacts are, compare that to our predictions, and we can tweak our models so that through time, our predicted impacts are getting closer and closer to what actually happens. And the end result is we're learning, we're making better decisions, we're understanding what the impacts of our hunting seasons are on our deer populations. So we went through that whole process. Again, this is what you all approved in April. And so I just want to walk through a couple of changes here, things that we want to highlight for people. The first one being Unit 1, which now encompasses what was previously Unit CWD. There's some changes felt there. So the special CWD opportunities that were in place previously, those are no longer in place. We had a lot of discussion about that through the commission meetings, and ultimately the commission kind of felt that, looking at the harvest data, there really wasn't a lot of increased harvest. Perhaps even the stigma of a disease unit and some of these more liberal regulations were kind of making people look elsewhere and go to other units. But the end result is a much more simplified hunting season package. And so one of the things we heard a lot from the public was let's get some simplicity in here. So if you look at the hunting guide from last year, there were 6 different tables with hunting seasons. Now we only have 1, and that's because all of the seasons start and end on the same date. All of the weapon seasons start and end on the same date. So the hunting seasons are the same across the state. The buck bag limit is 2 across the state. There's a slight change for Unit CWD there as well. However, earn a buck still applies if you're in a county that has a CWD positive detection. So if you're hunting in one of those counties, if you harvest a doe or an antlerless deer and you submit it for testing, you've earned yourself an additional buck tag, and there's no limit on those buck tags. CWD management is still important to us, and for those people who are wanting to participate in that management, this is a great opportunity where they can harvest additional antlerless deer and additional bucks to help mitigate the spread of CWD. So as far as antlerless bag limits go, there's been some changes there as well. For most of Middle and West Tennessee, the antlerless bag limits have stayed the same. It's that 3 does per day across the season. A lot of the felt change is going to be in East Tennessee. So as I said a second ago, we use these historic harvest rates and understanding of how hunters are harvesting deer, antlerless deer, antlered deer across these different regulation packages. What we found is there's really not a lot of change across those different packages. And so that modeling process showed we can allow more opportunities for antlerless take in East Tennessee. And so that's why you're seeing some of these more opportunity for harvesting antlerless deer in Eastern Tennessee. So just to provide a high level summary of that, we're excited about this. We think we've got this new improved management framework that's really going to help us monitor deer better, but also set better seasons with explicit objectives written down that we're trying to meet. We're using all this additional data in this repeatable structured process to meet those objectives. There are new units, but for the first time, they're biologically relevant units. I think if you look at some of the historical units, you'll notice the boundaries of those units actually reflect some of our regional administrative boundaries. And that came from, candidly, individuals sitting in a room and thinking, I think maybe something different is going on here. I don't want those regulations. I want these regulations. And we're trying to do this all by science moving into the future. There's a ton of reduced complexity, and we've actually been hearing a lot from the public. People are like, man, this is so simple. When I looked at the hunting guide last year, maybe I was a first-time hunter. I felt like I had an Ivy League law degree to figure out what was going on with all these different tables, and each season was slightly different. Now it's one table. It's really easy to understand. I'm a little more confident going out and knowing that I'm following the regulations. And then lastly, there are some changes, as I said. So the CWD regulations were reverted back, and there's some additional opportunities for antlerless take take in Eastern Tennessee. We know there's some folks concerned about both of those things. So I do want to commit to you guys. We are watching the harvest in both of those areas closely. We're going to be paying attention to that and trying to understand how these new regulations impact harvest in those areas. So I want to switch gears real quick. At the beginning, I said there's a new reporting feature that we'll have for hunters this year. And that is going to be that hunters, when they go to check a deer in, it's going to allow them to provide the harvest location of that deer if they want. And I want to give a few examples of why we're asking hunters to participate in this. It's optional. If they don't want to give us their location, they don't have to. But hopefully to garner some support, and so that hunters have an understanding and you guys have an understanding of why we're asking this question. I just want to walk through a couple simple examples. So currently, all hunters have to do is report the county that they harvested a deer in. So just for ease of an example, let's say a county has 25 deer killed. We don't know where those deer were killed. We just kind of look at it from this county had a harvest of 25. We know they're not equally distributed across the county, right? It might look something more like this. So if we can start to get some more spatially explicit models of the distribution of harvest, the distribution of hunting pressure, we can really fine tune our management and start to figure out what's going on in different areas with the deer population. One area where I think this is really going to help is just our customer service. We get a lot of questions from individuals saying, hey, what's going on with the deer population in my corner of the county? I'm not sure. And all we can really look at is this countywide harvest data. Well, there's this many deer harvested in the county. You know, we've got some other data that we can use, but it's not nearly as useful as having kind of some spatially explicit data. We can start tying this to land use and habitat use to understand, you know, what kind of areas deer are using better. If those areas are shifting, same thing with hunters and hunting pressure. You know, looking long term, there's a lot of conversations about how do we increase public hunting access. Well, this is an opportunity where we can really identify some areas where, hey, there's not a lot of hunting here. Let's investigate this area and see if we can't find some avenues to get people hunting, get more opportunity out there for hunters. And so this also has huge benefits for fine tuning our CWD management. So I want to use a couple examples here. If we pretend that this county is in a CWD unit and we're trying to understand how the disease is impacting that area. So let's say these 8 deer here are CWD positive. So right now, when we get a positive detection, we actually call the hunters, we follow up with them and get that location. We want to know where these positives are coming from. However, all the other deer killed, we don't do that. So we're kind of in the same boat. We know where the positives are, but we don't know if any deer were sampled around there, if any other deer were even taken around there. So when we report prevalence, all we're reporting is out of this many deer positive in this county and a total of this many deer tested, here's roughly what our prevalence is. But again, we know that's not how it's distributed. We know that that prevalence isn't equal across. Let's say we start to get these locations of all the other deer harvested, deer that are tested and not tested. We can really start to understand how the disease is spreading around the county, what areas we can implement different management strategies. Okay, let me back up a little bit here. I can't see the red circle on that screen. Okay, so if you see the red circle there, it's over the patch of deer, the 4 deer with the 1 black deer in the right in the middle. And so let's say we start to collect these locations. This is an area where we've got a bunch of positive deer. The other deer that have been harvested come back not detected. Well, we know that actual prevalence there is really high. That's a pocket where there's a lot of disease. We want to, you know, communicate with those landowners and let them know what their management strategies are. But say we've got another area like in the northwest corner here where there's 1 single positive animal and all the other deer taken around that area have not been positive. That's encouraging news for that landowner. And we can go to them and say, hey, the whole area surrounding yours doesn't have any disease. You guys are in a great situation to mitigate the spread and the prevalence in your local deer herd. We might have another situation where there's one lone positive detection and we don't have any samples from around that deer. Well, that's important information for us to get out there and try and collect, to work with those landowners in the area, let them know, hey, there's been a positive detection, and encourage them, hey, harvest some deer, let's try and get them tested so we can understand what the prevalence is in this little pocket. We might have a pocket like in the northeast corner where there's been no one's hunting deer, no one's sampling deer. That could be a huge reservoir for disease. Or it could be like in the southeast corner, it could be a pocket where there's no disease at all. You've got a great situation and you want to go in and protect that. So these are just kind of some examples that I wanted to walk you all through about how we can really fine tune our management and have a higher resolution and better understanding of the disease throughout some of these counties. So when hunters go in, this is the actual screen from where you go and report a deer. And we just kind of added a text box. We're still working through some of the kinks with this. So we don't have the full test sample yet. But I drew an arrow to this box. We're going to have a box that pops up similar to this that just says, hey, we can use the harvest location to improve our wildlife management. And then there's a little disclaimer there, this is not public information. We can't give this out. And we're going to generalize all these locations to a 1 mile grid. So we don't actually sit there and look at all the locations. We just get a number, like we have a 1 mile grid system and we get a number for each one of those individual squares in the grid of how many deer we're taking in there. And then hunters have the option. They can say, yeah, I want to support you guys. And they can click yes. Or if they don't want to do that, they're not comfortable giving us the harvest location, that's fine too. They can just click no. Now, if they do click yes, they'll get a map just like this on the screen where all they have to do is scroll to wherever they're hunting, tap the screen where they harvested that deer and hit submit. And so again, we're generalizing these locations to a 1 mile grid. We're not looking at 180,000 different individual locations. It would just be generalizing it for some of these models. The reason we're doing that, one is hopefully to make people more comfortable understanding we're just using this grid system, but most of the spatial models have actually been built using this 1 mile grid system. So it'll make it a lot easier for us on the back end to start analyzing it and using this data. So we're working out some final kinks for it now. This is not going to be active starting tomorrow during the velvet season. It will go in place before the regular archery season starts September 28th. We're going to test it out through this deer season. If all goes well, our plan is to implement this for turkeys and bears. Same thing, starting this spring so that turkey hunters, if they so choose, can give us the location of their harvest. But we're excited about this. We think some much better spatially explicit data will really improve management. We'll start to be able to integrate some of that spatial data into our population models that we use in this adaptive harvest management framework, and really start to get a bit of feel for some of the differences at a higher resolution. So with that, commissioners, I know the last few mornings have been extremely cool and have gotten me excited about deer hunting. Hopefully you guys are getting excited as well. And I'll be happy to answer any questions you guys have about the upcoming season.
Thank you, Assistant Chief McBride. I agree with your comment about these cool mornings. It's got my brain headed in another direction. Is there any comments or questions from Wildlife Committee members? Commissioner Butt.
I hate to put you on the spot, Mark, but the question I'm going to ask, I know Farm Bureau Insurance would be tickled about it, but now in Murray County, we have an abundance of deer. But according to my astute and knowledgeable commissioner in Fentress and our surrounding counties, then there's a lack of deer as well as turkeys. Do you have any idea? Is it because of past disease, blue tongue, EHD, or is it because of habitat? Or do you have any comments as to lack of populations in Area 4 and maybe moving east in 5, in the northern part of that particularly, why we don't have the population of deer and turkey there?
So, yeah, I wouldn't say overall that there's less. I would say the variation in the deer and turkey populations is much higher as you go east because the habitat diversity, the terrain diversity is much higher. So you do start to get into the mountains, a lot of pockets of closed canopy forests that are very poor habitat for deer and turkeys. But you do get down into some of the valleys, you get into areas with agriculture where there are higher deer and turkey densities. So it gets a lot more challenging to manage over there. And our hope is with some of that spatial stuff that I just talked about, we'll be able to get a little better understanding of that. But over the past 20 years, there's been a few fairly large EAHD outbreaks. Those certainly negatively impact the deer population. Normally it's short term, but it can last a little longer if there's poor habitat, because that's really, once populations are low, if the habitat's poor, they're going to get hit hard with productivity. And that's, when we see closed canopy forest, that's typically what's holding the populations back. There's poor breeding habitat, fawn rearing habitat, poult rearing habitat. So the animals might be there, but you can't bring a lot of new animals into the population because there's nowhere for those young animals to hide.
Thank you.
Any more questions or comments from the Wildlife Committee? Any questions from the full commission? I believe Commissioner Chairman Granbery had a question.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Davenport. We made a lot of changes and you went through a lot of stuff this afternoon. As you've been getting calls maybe through the licensing, what's the number one question with this new system?
There's kind of two areas that I would identify. One is few people asking about the CWD regulations, confirming what they're seeing. I see, rifles are no longer allowed during the velvet season. And the other one is asking questions about antlerless harvest in East Tennessee. Those are the two areas where I think people are kind of concerned and wondering where those came from.
After you answered them, they felt okay with it, or, did the information provide them the answers after you met with them?
Some yes, some no.
Okay.
Thank you, Commissioner Granbery. Any more questions from the full commission? Commissioner Cox.
Mark, very briefly, can you tell us what the testing guidelines are for the CWD area in West Tennessee? What are they currently? Or are there any?
You could clarify as far as requirements
If a hunter
to test.
kills a buck in Fayette County, does he have to have it tested?
Oh, he does not. We do not have any mandatory testing. It's all service testing. If hunters want it tested, we encourage them to do that, but it is not mandatory.
Anywhere in the CWD?
Essentially anywhere in the state.
Okay.
Yeah. So you can go to our website. There's a location of all the drop-off freezers and list of participating processors that you can take a deer to, and taxidermists that you can take a deer to, and they'll actually take that sample for you.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Cox. Commissioner Blue.
Hey, thank you again for all the hard work on this. Hey, and if you don't know the answers to this off the top of your head, no big deal. But what's the average number of deer taken per hunter in Tennessee? Do you know?
Across the state, it's about 1.6, between 1.6 and 1.7.
Yeah. Let me ask you this, and not everybody going to panic, but the surrounding states around us, what are there any states, and I believe there are, that has a 1 buck limit rather than a 2 buck limit?
There are a few states, yes, sir. But as far as just deer hunter numbers, pretty much every state's sitting right around that same number. 1.4 to 1.7, maybe, depending on what state you're in.
And I like the guidelines simplified. I think we head in the right direction. This is good. But let me ask you this: in your surveys that you did you ever see any indication of hunters wanting to go to a 1 buck limit in Tennessee rather than a 2 buck limit?
We do hear that. I think it's I think it's more of a vocal minority, because when we did those surveys back in October, what we found across the whole spectrum of hunters, most people are happy with 2. I think we did a survey 2 years ago where we asked that question, and it was 70% of the hunters, I think 68 or 70% of the hunters felt like the 2 buck bag limit was right. That's what they wanted.
Rather than a 1 buck limit.
Rather than a 1 buck.
But we
Yes,
saw
sir.
increased, obviously, larger size bucks when we went to 2 from 4 or.
We did. There's been,
I-
yeah.
And I just wondered, what are your thoughts? I'm not saying we would ever do this, propose this, but what do you think it would do to our deer harvest if we went to a 1 buck limit, but had unlimited earn a buck after the 1 buck? You had to kill a doe after your 1 buck to get your second buck.
With having a 1.4 deer per hunter average, most people are shooting less than 2 deer. I don't think you would change harvest much. I think if you look, most hunters are shooting 1 buck. Most hunters are shooting 1 doe if they shoot does. So in pockets where a lot of people let older bucks walk, you can see an increase, in age structure there. But I think overall, big picture statewide, it would not influence the deer population that much.
Thank you.
Do you know the buck doe ratio for the state average?
I don't. That's some of the data that we're working to collect with some of these population models to get a better idea of. And of course, it's going to vary a lot. But if I had to guess, there's a lot more does than bucks, especially when you look at the harvest data. And 10 or 15 years ago is when it really switched, and hunters in Tennessee started shooting more bucks than does every single year. And that's been consistent. Generally harvest quite a few more bucks than does. And that's not because we have more bucks than does. It's that hunters are selecting to shoot bucks and not shoot does. So I couldn't speculate and put a number on it, but.
Well, not to belabor this, but you probably don't have data from when the buck limit was, you could kill 11 with various licenses in archery, 4 in archery, 4 in gun, muzzleloader. And so you don't have any population dynamics when that was going on. I guess my point is the 2 bucks, and you need to stick with ducks. Those are social decisions. They're not scientific, biological decisions, right? 2 buck limit is a social decision. The commission wanted to grow bigger bucks, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good question. I know this has been cropping up a lot here recently. I'll talk to our data team. We can go back and see how far we can go back and look at the data and try and understand some of the buck harvest dynamics, because I'll be interested to see that. If folks are actually harvesting bucks different when the buck bag limit was 11, and I suspect across the state, there's probably not a whole lot of difference. But that's just speculation.
Thank you, Commissioner Blue and Commissioner Cox. Any other questions or comments from the full committee? Mark, just one comment I had is the earn a buck if you don't have to have a deer test positive for CWD, you just have to have it tested. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. Yep.
Okay.
If you submit that deer for testing, regardless of the result, you're eligible for an additional buck, and that's unlimited. You can earn an unlimited number of bucks during any given hunting season.
So if you were a buck hunter, say, if that's such a thing, and you just keep turning in deer, even if they all come back negative, you keep getting buck tags?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. I'll call Assistant Chief Wally Akins to the podium for some proclamations.
Good afternoon, Commission. I want to bring to you 4 different proclamations this afternoon. And if it pleases the Commission, I'll stop at each one or after each one for questions or further clarification. But I do have the 4 on the screen: the Oak Ridge WMA proclamation, a bear feeding proclamation for the city of Gatlinburg. Going back to our WMA proclamation to clarify a few things out of it that was passed last April, as well as make a correction for our Furbearer proclamation also passed last April. The Oak Ridge Wildlife Management Area, we felt like we needed to revise or amend this proclamation to better reflect the availability of hunting lands. Over the last few years, we've lost several acres, about 12,000 acres, primarily of huntable lands on that WMA. This loss of lands is due to development, expanded city limits, that kind of thing, et cetera. And so we felt it best to amend this proclamation to reflect those changes. So with that, I recommend the passage of Proclamation 2414, Oak Ridge Wildlife Management Area.
Thank you, Assistant Chief Akins. Committee members, you've heard the proclamation. Is there any comments or questions from the Wildlife Committee members? Commissioner Butt.
Now, I just call for a question. So moved.
I think we need to hear from the commission. Full commission, any questions or comments? We have a motion from Wildlife Committee member Butt. Can I get a second? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Proclamation referred to the full commission.
Okay, thank you. The next one I have is Proclamation 2415, prohibiting the feeding of bears in Gatlinburg. This proclamation was first established back in 2000. We have a renewed commitment from the agency and the city to enforce this proclamation for public safety. And as you know, we've had a lot of more publicly advertised bear activity this year, it seems. But we want to clarify the intention of this proclamation to include leaving food or garbage unsecured and accessible or accessible to bears would be prohibited, and also prohibit the unintentional feeding after notice has been given. Examples of unintentional feeding may be birdseed or garbage that's been left unsecured. So again, just to renew this commitment and to clarify the language in this proclamation. With that, the agency recommends the passage of Proclamation 2415, prohibiting the feeding of bears in Gatlinburg.
Thank you, Assistant Chief Akins. Any comments from the Wildlife Committee? Commissioner Box.
Maybe you said this, but I thought this was already the rule.
It is the rule, but it needs some more clarification. The old proclamation didn't explicitly talk about unintentional feeding or leaving garbage unsecured, that type of thing. So it's just an update to try to make it more clear what should be enforced in that proclamation.
Great.
Tori, did you have a comment? You're on.
I was going to offer for Commissioner Box. This first come up in the context of some of the bear issues in Gatlinburg, and this was first done by the commission in 2000. And if you're familiar with what's available online to the public, we had a lot of people that couldn't find it in our partners in East Tennessee. And that's what led the discussion that maybe now's the time to bring this back to the commission. Let's make some clarifications in the language. I believe some of the municipal boundaries changed a little bit. So we tried to account for that in this proclamation and give you all the opportunity to kind of look at this issue again.
Thank you, Tori. Thank you, Commissioner Box. Commissioner Butt.
Now, Derek, just a question to our bear specialist, Gibbs. Would you update us on the efforts of the Gatlinburg officials and the new garbage disposable containers and everything that's been done to check the interaction of bears in that area, please.
Sure, thank you. I need to turn this on. Dan Gibbs, Black Bear Coordinator. Thank you, Commissioner Butt. So it has been a very busy year, and we keep getting the question, what's going on this year? What's happening? What's different? And, if you go back and look at conflict, there's some years that are higher than other years. Sometimes it's a certain part of the state where we have a lot of conflict. Sometimes it could be the entire region. A good example would be in District 42. They've got a lot of conflict calls this year as well, but they're spread out across the entire district. It's not one real hot spot. It's just everywhere. Where in 41, Blount and Sevier County are really the hot spots this year. The dumpsters, Gatlinburg really stepped up and spent to the tune of about $2.3 million, I believe, on about 400 bear-resistant dumpsters, and they're working very well. And there's even some that say they're working too well, right? Because now we're having all these other conflicts. And, those dumpsters are kind of some of the reason why we're seeing more conflicts, because there are a lot of bears that are used to getting trash out of these dumpsters, and they've always been tucked away the back of the parking lot, back of the building where people didn't see the bears. And now those food sources are secure. Now they're coming a little bit closer to people and hitting these trash cans that may not be secure. That's part of it. There's other attractants that haven't been addressed yet that the city's talking about how they're going to do it, namely construction sites and construction dumpsters that are open top. That's a really big issue, and we're working with the city to try to come up with a couple of game plans to test some ideas on that to see what would work to keep not only bears out, but keep people from throwing their trash in these dumpsters that are designed for construction materials. And then the last thing, which is real important, and this is just going to take a lot of time, but whether it's Gatlinburg or anywhere in the state, people tend to wait too long before they start addressing bears on their property, whether it's around their home, at a hotel, or a business. When they first see them, they think it's neat, it's a novelty, it's kind of cool. It's not doing anything. It's just eating some bird seed. It just knocked my trash can over. And then they ignore that. They let that go on. And then before you know it, it's on their porch or it's tearing into a chicken house or something like that. And then they pick up the phone and they want somebody to come do something. And unfortunately, it's usually too late at that point to make any kind of effort to change that bear's behavior. So a lot of that has just come to a head. And it's been a very, very busy year for us. We're talking a lot with the director's office and law enforcement about how we approach addressing these calls. We've probably done more site visits this year than we've done the last 10 combined, I would say. So we're really focusing on getting on the property where these people are calling and trying to give them good, solid recommendations. And what we're learning is the public just doesn't understand what attractants are. They call and say, hey, this bear is knocking over my trash can, and I did what you said, I secured it, but the bears are still coming around. And you get out there and they've got pet food outside, they got bird feeders, they got grills, they've just got lots of other things that are attracting bears. And Bearwise, tons of new materials that Bearwise, we're pumping out stuff as quick as we can through Bearwise, and it's being really well received. And I'll say, despite everything that's going on, I also hear people call and say, or they'll see me out, working. I went to the Gatlinburg, and it's the first time I was down there in probably 8 years, and it's the cleanest I've ever seen it. You drive by and you see these new dumpsters and you don't see trash laying all over the ground. So despite all of the conflicts we've had and all the headaches, we are seeing improvement. It's just going to take many years. And it's what we keep telling all these businesses, you're in this forever. This isn't a go here and do this and your problem goes away. It's something that you have to do and you got to stick to it, and you can't let up. It's a forever thing. And lots of cities all across East Tennessee need to start doing a lot of the things that Gatlinburg has started. And the sooner they do that, the better off they'll be.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Butt. Any more comments from the Wildlife Committee? Any comments from the full commission? Commissioner Baloo?
Hey, and this may be a Tory question, just real quick, but with this proclamation, if we cite somebody, is this like a Class A or Class B misdemeanor? And do the cities have matching city ordinances that they cite, and it's basically the same Class A or Class B misdemeanor or whatever?
It's a Class C under our rules. We're having discussions with the city on how best to go forward with this. I think that's probably the best place to put that right now.
Okay.
So it's civil, not criminal.
If we cite it, it's criminal.
Thank you, Tory. Thank you, Commissioner Blue. Any more comments from the full commission?
Greg,
Commissioner Woods?
So I seen a report on the local news last night about this, and it mentioned that in the Gatlinburg area, the DoorDash folks were coming to the wrong address or not getting someone to come to the door and just leaving the food at the porch. So who gets that citation when that happens?
If you're asking me, I don't know. That would be a law enforcement question. And obviously there's going to be some officer discretion in that situation. So I'd be forced to make an answer to that question.
Fight the bear.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Woods. Any more comments from the full commission?
Yeah, you know, related to that, it looks like to me that if that's going on, the city or TWRA needs to notify these food delivery people that they can't do that.
Well, yes, Dan, go ahead.
It's a great point, Commissioner Cox. And we do, when those types of things happen, a good example would be driving down the road. I saw a bear, and a bear resistant trash can that wasn't bear resistant, just broke, got the name off the cabin. It was there. And I was able to call the cabin company and advise them of that. And they actually fixed it pretty quickly. I was quite pleased with that. So there is a lot of that going on. And that is something new that we hadn't traditionally done, is taking the time to make those phone calls. So this has happened a few times. And, it's kind of hard. One of the hardest things in the world is trying to get a hold of people with Airbnb to try to get information on that website. And getting with DoorDash, you got to get hold of DoorDash. And that's not an easy thing to do. As far as a citation, I mean, if you actually knew who did that and you could inform them not to do it again, and they did it again, then they would fall under to be cited at that point, because they've been given notice that they can't do that. But we are really trying to identify as much as we can those opportunities to educate people. But some of this stuff we're dealing with now, like DoorDash and these cabin rentals, that you have no idea. Maybe somebody lives literally in Alaska that owns this cabin. It's hard sometimes. We are making those efforts for sure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Cox. Obviously, this is a very widespread, large-scale problem that the agency's resolving, and we just hate to see bears get into these patterns, because, as they pointed out, it's usually a bad outcome for the bear. Any more comments from the commission? I'll make a motion that we proceed with referring Proclamation 2415 prohibiting the feeding of black bears in Gatlinburg to the full commission. Can I get a second? All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion has been referred to the full commission. Chairman Granbery has requested that we take a 15-minute break. So let's report back here at 2:30. Wally, would you like to proceed with Proclamation 2416, revision of Proclamation 2406?
Yes, sir. Thank you so much. I'll begin with this amendment recommendation to our WMA refuge and public hunting area season and bag limits. This is our big WMA proclamation that we present every season setting period. We found a few issues with generic language and a mistake in one of these cases that we would like to recommend for amendment to clarify the language to make it better. We're not taking away or changing anything that was approved this past April, but these are all clarifications. The first one is Happy Hollow WMA. We didn't even bring this recommendation to the commission this past season setting. It is a verbiage adjustment of because the month of November has 5 Saturdays in this calendar year. So the current language says 3 one-day hunts, three-day hunts beginning on the 3rd Saturday in November and running for 3 consecutive days. Since November does have 5 Saturdays, this language does not apply. It's not correct. So the amendment would be three-day hunts beginning on the Saturday before Thanksgiving and running for 3 consecutive days. The other 2 hunts are the first and third weekends in December. That is also in generic language form and requires no amendment or adjustment. At the request of legal counsel and advice from them, we needed to add some language to clarify the youth participation in the quail quota hunt at Bridgestone Firestone Centennial Wilderness to ensure the party size stays 3. The current language is 4 one-day hunts last Thursday before Christmas, and then in the other 3 in the month of January. The applicants may bring 2 other hunters for a maximum party size of 3. The amendment would be to simply add the language, party may not exceed 2 youth. We really went around and around internally with this and discussed it. And we wanted to stay conservative, a quality hunting experience, but also to protect a resource here. So that's our amendment recommendation for that. The other one is this sentence is what was presented to you for Catoosa WMA regarding the turkey season, which opens the Saturday after the youth hunt. And the youth hunt on Catoosa is the same as the statewide opening weekend. And then running for 4 consecutive weeks, ending on a Sunday. And again, this is the language that we presented back in April. When we got to the proclamation, we realized that was not correct, and it didn't reflect our intention for a 4-week season on Catoosa. The language now says 1 non-quota hunt from the Saturday after the opening day of the statewide spring turkey season, and that, again, on Catoosa is the youth hunt, until the 4th Sunday. And if you look on a calendar, that makes this a 2.5-week season. So to correct this and to amend the language to be the Saturday after the opening day of the statewide spring season and state, it remains open for 4 weeks ending on a Sunday of the statewide spring turkey season. Lastly, we have the North Cherokee WMA. Similar to the previous slide, this is the language that was presented to you in April that says the archery bear season is open the first Saturday in October and runs concurrent with statewide season. The language in the proclamation was listed incorrectly. It says same as statewide seasons, which is September the 28th through October 25th. So we like to recommend of October and then run same as the Bear Hunt Zone 1 statewide season. And this would add 4 additional hunting days to the bear archery season in North Cherokee, I'm sorry. With that, the agency recommends passage of Proclamation 2416, Wildlife Management Area, Refuge and Public Hunting Area Seasons and Bag Limits.
Thank you, Assistant Chief Akins. Any questions, comments from the Wildlife Committee? Being none, any comments or questions from the full commission? We have in front of us Proclamation 2416. I move that we move forward with it for recommendation of the full commission. Can I get a second? All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Proclamation 2416 moves forward to the full commission. Assistant Chief Akins, would you like to proceed with Proclamation 2417?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Our last proclamation recommendation is 2417, our statewide furbearer hunting and trapping season and bag limits. We had a mistake in the wording and the language for the nighttime coyote and bobcat season that was approved in April. The current language says the bobcat and coyote nighttime season starts 30 minutes after sunset to 30 minutes before sunset. Obviously, this would be a 24-hour hunt day and not the intention of what was proposed. So the amendment would be to change one word at the end of that, nighttime hunting after sunset to 30 minutes before sunrise.
Thank you, Assistant Chief Akins. Any comments from the Wildlife Committee related to Proclamation 2417? Any comments from the full commission?
I've got a question. I assume that the new coyote night hunting with shotguns is open.
It opened August the 11th. Is that
Okay.
correct? Until the 11th. I'm sorry.
It's open.
It's not open currently. It will open again 1 week after the deer season.
Okay.
It was open for 11 days.
You have a report on?
Last I heard, I've not heard anything. Law enforcement did not have any calls or reports. That's correct.
Thank you, Commissioner Cox. Any more comments from the full commission? I move that we move forward with recommending Proclamation 2417 to the full commission. Can I get a second? All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Proclamation 2417 moves forward to the full commission. Chairman Granbery, that concludes the business of the Wildlife Committee.
Thank you, Commissioner Davenport. And at this time, I'll turn it over to Commissioner Cox to talk about the budget. And before I do that, I just want to say this is probably one of the most important things this commission does is approve the budget. And this committee and this full commission has worked tirelessly through the summer on a lot of issues. We're still working on a lot of issues, and there's a lot of work to be done. But I know Commissioner Cox will talk about the budget, but I feel very good about where we are as a commission and the level of effort that's been gone into this. And so at this time, I'll turn it over to Commissioner Cox.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Frank, would you like to make your presentation, please?
You hear me now? All right. Okay, today I would like to propose our budgets for FY25 and FY26. I'll start by going a short overview of how our funds are managed. We have three main funds, the wildlife, boating, and wetland funds. And as we manage these, we must keep them separate. And as such, I'll be presenting a budget for wildlife and a budget for boating, and then a full agency budget showing the two combined. Just briefly how these operating funds work. The wildlife fund is for things like working on WMAs, stocking fish, enforcement, shooting ranges, and it's funded primarily through the sale of hunting and fishing licenses. We also get federal reimbursement for projects that we do, and we get some state funding through the wetland fund to help with maintenance on those projects. The boating fund, again, is separate. It's funded primarily by boaters registration, and we get federal reimbursement for some of those projects, and the state fuel tax provides some funding as well. Types of projects we do with the boating fund is safety and education on the water, enforcement, and we build areas. The wetland fund is provided through the tax on real estate transactions, and dollars are used to purchase wetland habitat, some specific upland habitat that are defined by law, and to maintain TWRA-owned property. We have reserves in these funds, and I want to mention reserves because they're very important to how we operate financially. We're currently, as of July, we had about $55 million in our wildlife fund, which only represents about 5 months of operating costs. This is our rainy day fund, if you will. The fund has 15 million in it, and the wetland fund had about 26 million at that time. These especially the reserves for the wildlife and boating fund, are really important to provide consistency. If we don't sell as many licenses as we would like, or have some other shortfall, we still provide the same services. So having reserves to dip into is very important for that role. It also is important for us to front the money that we use, and so that we can get our federal reimbursement. So we have to have the money to make the money back. And lastly, these reserves can serve as a source of income for us, because we do get interest on them when they're in the bank, and we have investments as well with these reserves. So that defrays the cost that we might need to get from licensed purchasers. So on the timeline, we have been working on this. The budget is an annual process, really. We start in April, and through July, TWRA staff identified projects that they were going to need to do. And we also looked at expansions to our current year, FY25. In late July, we met with the commission and informed them of how the budgeting process was going, and gave them a preview of what we were going to be presenting. So here we are today and tomorrow presenting these budgets, and what will happen next with hopefully a favorable vote. We need to get our budget to the commissioner of F&A by September 16th to comply with state law. The next step is that we are included in the governor's budget, and we appear before legislative committees, and finally it gets in the final state budget. So with that, I'll jump into our budget, just a little bit of jargon. And when we talk about carry forwards, I'm talking about projects that we didn't get done in FY24 that we need to carry the funds over to FY25. These are usually big projects, like construction projects, or they might be a grant contract that we have open with a vendor or a grantee, and they haven't completed the project yet. Expansions are slightly different. They are projects that we didn't plan to do in that fiscal year, but we are considering adding them. A lot of times these are unexpected projects or unexpected opportunities to use federal or other grant types. I'll start with carry forwards. This year we had 50 carry projects in the wildlife fund, totaling $21 million that we intend to carry forward into FY25 to complete. There were 3 in the boating fund. You'll see these numbers across the headers on this column here. I want to go through that. The total project amount was 21.8. Of those, that 21.8, we anticipate being reimbursed 13.2 million from federal grants. We also have the ability to be reimbursed through the wetland fund for the maintenance portions of those things for $12 million. As a net, we put 3.5 million, we'll move 3.5 million into the wildlife fund when those 50 projects are completed, if every one of them is completed. On the boating fund, those 3 projects, we've got a net, you'll see, of negative 930,000. This is largely because we have $865,000 worth of marina grants that we've already written to individual marina owners that they have not completed yet. So we know we're going to have to give that money out. We've already written contracts for it, but those dollars are less. Those dollars came in for that purpose, and they're going out for that purpose. So it's kind of a wash for us as an agency to have to spend that in FY25. These are just some examples of the types of those 50 projects that were carried forwards. Like I said, large construction projects. Here's the first one. There's the Buffalo Ridge building out at our shooting complex. That's one that will be heavily reimbursed by federal money. We're also eligible for wetland reimbursement. So we will net to the reserve on that project. We have a grant with the Doe Mountain for the Doe Mountain Range, and that is eligible for federal reimbursement. So there'll be no cost to the reserve from that project. At John Sevier, one of our agency managed ranges, we're trying to improve the bathrooms there. We will get federal reimbursement. We will get wetland reimbursement because we own that property, and it will net to the reserve a little over $300,000. And so on. Another project we're all looking forward to is our headquarters office getting a new parking lot and stairwell on the side of the building. That's one we hope to get done in FY25. And just to throw a boating example in there, I mentioned those marina grants. As I said, we've got dozens of marina operators that have these grants that they can do work and we would reimburse for it. So we're holding that money in anticipation of them doing the work. Now I'll move on to expansions for the FY25 budget. In the Wildlife Fund, we've got several. We've already shared this document with the commission. I probably don't need to go over all these in great detail, but I'll just let you see them. I maybe hit some of the high notes here. The Montgomery County Range is one that we have expanded because the costs there have gone up. Luckily, we get a really good federal reimbursement on that, and the partner makes the match, so we're not out any reserve funds on that. We're doing some work at the Lake Halford parking lot, some work at Marrowbone Lake, our Flintville Hatchery, a couple of land purchases here. One is at Blackburn Fork WMA and another at Uchee WMA. We're going to buy a grader at North Cumberland, and we've got a project with the Nature Conservancy to improve trails on the Ed Carter unit. Just a few more on the Wildlife Fund. We have to have funds available to cover the depreciation and the cost of our vehicles. We have that. We're adding that to our budget. We have a grant from TDEC to work on Bill Dance Signature Lakes for $1.5 million. So we need to add that authority to spend that money. And we also we've got a lease here from a forestry company basically to use their lands for the WMAs. Polaris for the bat caves on TWA property. That's so that we can haul steel into these remote areas where we're trying to protect bat habitat. Lastly, we've got one work base that we've approved for construction at the Catoosa work in Catoosa. So in total, we're looking at $9.2 million worth of expansions in FY25, and there were no boating fund expansions. On to FY26. We have one wildlife project. This is a project where there's remote sensing of anything that is tagged with a transmitter that flies. So this system is out there. There's $90,000 for this project. It will help them track bats, birds, and such. In the boating fund, I mentioned marina grants a couple times. Last year, we collected about $1.8 million. We will again be putting that out for new grants for marina operators. So we want to get that in the FY26. Whatever we collect in 25, we'll dole out in 26, and we'll keep that pattern going as long as we're collecting those funds. So in summary, the FY25 budget, including the carry forwards and expansions, makes it a much larger than a typical annual budget because it has a lot of last year's work in it and a lot of expansions here. The top rows there are our costs, salaries, and benefits. And then our operating costs is the next line for a total of $173 million to the agency. And the funding sources for these, I'll walk through those in total for the agency. We get about $383,000 for foregone ammo tax dollars. We collect we anticipate collecting about $58 million in license and registration. We are eligible for, we have projects that could collect as much as $62 million in federal revenue. And our current services are some odd checks that we get for like sharecropping and timber sales or things like that. We know we're going to do. And that $35 million is our wetland fund reimbursement. And anything we can't cover with the above comes out of our reserve. So we would hit our with this budget. However, we don't spend all the money that we have budgeted, so we're anticipating a much lower hit on that. And also, our salaries and benefits line is elevated due to requirements that F&A provides a higher guideline amount than we would probably use, but we have to use their guideline amount. So we don't expect to hit the reserve to the tune of $12 million, but that is what we need to show because we can't predict where we're not going to do work. We have to show the whole budget in its entirety. The FY26 budget is here with just those couple of expansions. So the number is much lower. We're about $130 million. And this budget is a lot lower than they have been in the past traditionally, in that I know things have gone up in price, but behavior-wise, we asked our staff to reduce requests, and they really did. You saw we only had 2 requests for expansions. We also reduced the amount of money that was requested overall by about $800,000 across the board. This just meant that staff had here and there, staff gave up projects that they didn't feel that they were going to be able to do or need to do, so they gave that money back, so to speak. There's no new research plan for FY26. And in addition to that, we're also holding of these budgeted positions. We have 20 of these positions are being held in like frozen, so to speak. We're not filling them just to conserve cash as we go forward here. We've also declined the request for some new construction. You saw we had 1 work base in there, but there was another requested that wasn't ready to be funded yet. And we chose to not fund it. And we also have delayed the development of a Catoosa Ridge Training Academy. So with that, this was a very conservative budget, I felt. And this is the FY26. You just saw the FY25. These are the 2 that we're requesting passage of. And I'll take any questions at this time.
For information, Saltzman, Devaney, Davenport, Moody, and Ballou are on the committee. And if any of you all have any questions of Frank, thank you, Frank. That was really good.
Thank you.
No questions. What about the rest of the commission? Stan?
Deputy, just for clarification for the public as well as those in attendance, you might explain our constraints as far as the fiscal year 23, 24, 24, 25, 25, 26, and how that applies to our budget as we look at when you say fiscal year 26 budget.
Sure.
So
Sure.
if you don't mind doing that.
For example, that we're currently in FY25, which started July 1 of 24, and it will go to June 30th of 2025. So when I say FY26, that's July 1 of 25 to June 30, 26.
Any other questions? I would like to, we've been over this and working really hard on it. We've had Zoom calls and we've had a in-person meeting that most of the day to work on this budget and understand this budget. And, you know, a year and a half ago, we were in pretty good shape on money. And then the governor graciously gave all our employees probably a well-deserved raise, but it really kind of put us in a hole. So we're upside down on our budget, but Director Maxidon and his staff, I can't tell you how hard they've worked all the guys put the budgets together. I can't tell you how hard they worked to get a budget that we could live with. And I've talked to Frank a lot more than he wishes I had probably, but I would like to thank Ken Tarkenton. Ken's kind of the guy that stands behind and you ask a question, Ken knows the answer. Now, if you ask him what gauge shotgun it is, he'll tell you how the shotgun was made before he gets to tell you what the gauge is. But he's got all the information, and I don't know what you're going to do when he's gone. So thank you so much. That's all I've got. I feel like this is as good a budget as we're going to get this year, and I'd recommend that we pass it, and I'll take a motion.
So moved.
Second. Anybody? Second. Second. Yep, second. All right, I've got a motion, a second. Committee members, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We approve the carry forwards for 25 and the FY26 budget.
Thank you, Commissioner.
All right, thank you, Chairman Cox. And I think that brings us to the end of our long day of committee day here at Farm Bureau. We want to thank the Farm Bureau folks again. And if you want to ride tonight to dinner, text Director Maxidon. We will provide transportation if you want to drive your own car. Hope you don't get lost because it's kind of tricky to find. You're not invited, Monty. Ivy is, but you're not. You got to go referee a football game. Second, Commissioner Blue.
Hey, just real quick, Chairman, I apologize. I should have said this on the front end, but I know Emily does a great job, and I know we're looking at some new things with social media, and I think that's very important for our agency to show everything that our agency does. And just like the things that we covered today, from our budget to bear management to everything in between, just in my little neck of the woods in Northwest Tennessee and just a few counties, TWRA has done an extensive amount of dirt work for Holly Fort Shooting Complex. We have brought forward a substantial grant for them to help the Scholastic Clay Target Program and several other shooters. Our heavy equipment crew's been busy working Harmon's Creek, doing construction down there on the road, and several other projects. Our fisheries and several other people came out and did a Levi Miles fishing rodeo for young men and women with special needs. We've got a hunter safety class going next week. We've been part of an Asian carp tagging program in Kentucky Lake and Pickwick, duck banding programs, the boating enforcement on Kentucky Lake. I've seen them working and helping several different stranded boaters and various things. Believe it or not, you may have heard a little talk about the duck food in Camden Bottoms. I've toured that Camden Bottoms, and it absolutely looks great. I didn't get to plant our duck corn on July the 10th. I don't think Wally planted his July the 20th. The guys, men and women, are working in a swamp, and there's corn in just about every field. There's millet. They've done a great job. So I just think it's important, and I hope TWRA in the future can show the community how important everything TWRA does in our individual neck of the woods in every county. You do a great job. So thank you. That's all I wanted to say to the men and women of TWRA in Northwest Tennessee. You're doing a good job. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Blue. And I think this commission knows full well how intentional we are on communication, and we've really taken it to a whole nother level, and it can always be improved and added to. Do any other commissioners have any other comments? Commissioner Butt.
Well, I'm happy to announce that the Murray County has a new law enforcement officer, and if you'll step forward, introduce yourself, and let everybody know who you are. So we're happy to have one after the absence for the last 6 months or so, even though we've had sparse coverage. Go ahead. Recent graduate of the academy, so he's going to hit the ground running.
I am, certainly. My name's Connor Baird. Some of you know me. I've had a few of you over my course of working with the agency for about a year. I'm new to the law enforcement capacity in about 8 months. So I'm from Campbell County, new to Murray County, graduated from Tennessee Tech in 2022. So happy to be here.
Culture shock.
Go Golden Eagles.
Thank you.
Welcome. Welcome to the agency. Anybody else? A couple of housekeeping matters. I know a couple of commissioners are not going to be able to join us tomorrow. Be sure to make sure your calendar reflects the 19th and 20th of September. We'll be in Northwest Tennessee with Commissioner Blue, and he's
God
gonna,
country.
yeah, well, he's gonna host us in a either fishing or dove, and we'll get that out soon so everybody can enjoy that. The raffle, very important part of this agency, is our foundation raffle. Tickets are on sale right now. Please buy some tickets. If you hadn't already, please buy some. Again, contact Director Maxidon if you need a ride to the dinner tonight, and I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you so much.